All right, it's 12:30 and I'd like to welcome all of you to the HR Space RGT Adaptive HR webinar. We have a wonderful cohort of at least 21 people with us on the webinar, and very happy to be sharing this topic that we are very passionate about. This came about, the whole adaptive HR concept, from work we've been doing around the world, where we are seeing HR teams really struggling to redefine their role and to get their heads around robotics, AI, and all the changes happening in the fourth industrial revolution. We are seeing faster pace being taken up by teams around the world than in Australia. And we really want to make sure that we support the Australian HR practitioners to be able to step up into HR transformation and people transformation that leads to us really making and leapfrogging these issues that we have. Let's get straight into it. What we know is that the world is changing very rapidly. I think a lot faster than most of us would imagine. I was reading a book this morning, Digital Business Leader, and they make it so clear that we really have a small window of opportunity. We don't have a lot of time. If we start to think about what's happening in the world and think about this from your own organization's point of view, we know the future of work has hit us a lot harder and a lot faster than expected. So technology is everywhere. If we are not delivering employee experience and employee engagement through smartphones, we will not have people respond back to us. They want a consumer-grade smartphone experience in their employee experience, with 2.6 billion plus smartphones now in the world and people untethered from their workplace. We also know that 65% of today's primary school children will work in jobs that don't exist yet. And that's a really hard thing to get your head around. What does that mean for your employees? We know that diversity and generational change is very interesting. We're going to work with 4 generations in the workplace, and 25% of our global population will come from Africa by 2050. More important for you is the jobs vulnerable to automation. It should sit around the same level as the UK and US, around the 45% mark. And in China and India, where we do a lot of our work, we see it around the 77% mark. We also see data growing 9 to 10 times more. So if you're starting to think about analytics capability in HR, we really need to get that data in order and get good governance around that so that we can start to use good predictive analytics. One of the good things for us is that the cost of playing with technology has come down significantly. So from 500,000 to about 22,000, that makes it possible for us to actually move often off HRIS platforms and start to use some very different thinking. Key to HR, change in nature of career, 2.5 to 5 years shelf life of skills. So if you're not driving a great reskilling effort in your organization and your industry right now, you will fall behind and your people's skill sets will become less valuable, putting them at risk. The diversity in our workforce we've spoken about, but we know millennials are now very much part of our organizations. Z is starting to come into the organization. And of course, one thing people don't seem to be getting their heads around is that 40% of our workforces, no matter what industry you're in, by next year, 2020, will be contingent workforces. So what we are not seeing enough of yet in Australia is a really holistic people strategy and HR transformation strategy moving fast enough to really deal with these issues that are coming from the future of work. So some people say this is shocking, others say, yes, we know this, others say we know this, but we're not doing anything about it. I wonder where you are as I speak to you about these issues. And I hope you're not scared, because I think this creates an amazing opportunity for HR to shine and to drive strategy, to drive adaptation, to drive digital transformation, to drive reskilling, to drive smart talent strategies in the organization that will become the competitive advantage of organizations in the future. Of course, all of this is coming about because of technology change. Why more so now than in the past? Since 2014, the technology has shifted to the Internet of Things, automation, and robotics. We also know that 5G is going to actually really enable Industry 4.0, or as people are now talking about, Economy 4.0. But what we know is that business productivity and leadership ability and people's capability have not kept up with the technology change. And so there's this enormous gap in business potential, which, as we've said before, is an amazing opportunity for HR to not just get a seat at the table, but to actually set the table. A lot of our clients, especially out of the Middle East, Africa, and Europe, are asking us now to complete these kind of projects for them. How many jobs? I have a client in the Middle East who asked us to do a project on how many jobs will become obsolete, automated, and how many new jobs or change jobs will we have in our organization because of digitalization. So one of the key things that HR can drive is looking at demand drivers and estimating changes in labor demand in their industries and organizations. This means we can't do workforce planning the way we used to do it. We need to understand things a lot faster and a lot better. And this is probably one of the key projects we'll see going across the world in many of our clients going forward. We also need to understand how to redesign our organizations. We have this idea that robots are taking jobs, but what actually is happening is there's a skills reshuffle. So we're really starting, we have to unpack our organization at a task and capability level. And we have to understand which of those drive the most value to our customers. And then we need to make sure that we are reshaping the skill sets and the roles people are in. And very often you're going to find that those skills do not exist in the market. So you have to build them inside your own organization. If all of this is ringing true for you, then hopefully you have started to have these conversations with your board, with your executive committee, and you've started to put the people strategies and HR transformation strategies in place that enables the shift for your organization so that you can take up this window of opportunity that's in front of all of us. Let me ask for a moment. You've got a question and answer capability there in your Zoom. What we'd like to know is, as we've just spoken, which of these challenges are you seeing in your industry and organization? Give us a sense of what you're seeing from where you're sitting in HR. We've got 59 participants now, so we think there should be quite a few questions and answers in there. So I might ask Sophie to help me with that, if you don't mind, Sophie, to keep an eye on that for me. So any comments from anybody in terms of what we've just spoken about, the fast change of work, where HR can position itself? Are we moving fast enough? What are you seeing? And how many of you are really in a focused transformation right now? So just put that in there in a chat box for us or in the Q&A. Sophie will monitor that for me, if you don't mind, Sophie, and if you could also just feedback to us anything that you're seeing in there.
Yeah, Marianne, there's a question from Anika Reid. Workforce transformation. There's quite a few actually people putting things in the Q&A box. So if you can.
Yes, I can't see it right now. So I'm just wondering if you can take me through it. So
yeah. So Anika Reid has put workforce transformation, reviewing current skills and capabilities to understand what we need to grow, reduce, continue in our business of professional services.
That's very important. And professional services, of course, is one of the most disrupted industries right now. Any others, Sophie, so far?
Yeah, Kathy Tomeo, automation of production capability, not moving fast enough. Transformation needs to be a strategic priority.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it needs to be an integrated approach. It cannot be bits by pieces. Even in HR transformation, we can't just take one process at a time. We have to look at the whole employee experience and the whole organization structure and skills. Any more, Sophie?
That's all for now. Oh, sorry, one more. How can HR and technology work more closely together?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're seeing very much is that actually HR, finance, and technology have to work together, because as you look at skills, you have to look at cost of reskilling versus automating versus putting people in from outside. So you have to form this strong triad between IT, finance, and HR, and really work towards the same goals with the CEO to enable what needs to happen in your industry and organization. Any more?
One more. Becoming a digital first organization with a significant bricks and mortar retail footprint and managing the capability shift required with our people.
Yes, absolutely. And what we're seeing a lot of is what we call dual strategy. So it's kind of transforming your core and keeping it running and keeping continuing improvement while you build your sprint arms and your innovation arms that's starting to build and test and probe in your new environment. And we need to be right across that as an HR community. All right, thank you for those comments. I see there are a few more. We have an amazing group of 63 participants on, so I'm sure we're going to get some rich feedback. Any more, Sophie?
Yeah, one more. Employees are often panicked as systems get upgraded, etc. They believe their jobs are at risk. How do we differentiate between enhancement and job reduction?
Yeah, that's really important. I want to just go back to the slide for a moment, if I can. This is such an important slide, and the methodology that we use with clients around the world. So in order to get the messaging right, what we're trying to do is understand the baseline labor demand in a world without automation. So what would we need if we didn't automate, if we didn't augment, what would we need? And then what we look at is we look at the strategies in each part of the business. Which jobs or skill sets will be replaced by automation? Then what we look is how many jobs can be created by automation, so the data scientists and all those things. And we look at what skill sets will be replaced and what skill sets do we need. We also find that as we repackage our jobs, we find that we actually have some incremental job step-ups. So we have some of our jobs being enhanced. And that gives us our net effect on our future labor demand. I think it's really critical that you get an agreement in the organization at an executive level of what that looks like so that you can get your messaging right and what your strategies are around build, buy, borrow, partner, or transition, so that you can then get your messaging right to your employees, because there's a lot of very scary information out there at the moment. Every single day, people are seeing robots are taking over my job. And this is really scary for people. So I think it's really important that you get that strategy set, that you understand those numbers, you understand where the skills that you need are in the market or whether you have to create it yourself. And then you can message it right to the, and this is certainly what we're doing in most of the multinationals that we are working with. We are taking that approach. We're making sure we have our numbers and our strategies right. And then we do some other, how many people are going to retire, what other things do we want to do with our workforce from a diversity point of view. And we then take that fully formed strategy and well informed by data to speak to our employees about it and engage them in this. So the good news, one of the things we do to help employees is that we start to say to them, yes, structure of work will change through work design, and we need to be high performance. Yes, work will be disrupted and automated. But what we will undertake to do as an organization, and this is really critical, is we will build distinctive human capabilities in our organization. And those human capabilities will help you no matter what role you need to go into in the future. And so we really need to see this now as building meta skills in our organization. Meta skills that build expertise, relationships, and creativity. You can have a look at them. They're things like sense making, judgment, decision making, collaboration, human-centered design, conceptualizing, storytelling, all of those kind of skill sets. We have a program called Personal Agility, just to build personal agility in people. Growth mindset is something a lot of organizations doing. And it's just basic digital literacy. So what are you doing right now, not just to reskill for the future, but also to build your distinctive human capabilities so that you can ensure that your people, no matter what changes are coming, are ready for it, they are future fit, and even if they leave your organization for another, that they have some human capabilities that cannot be replaced by machines. And this will become more and more tricky as time goes on, but we really do have to do this. And I think expecting governments to do this for us is tricky. We're lucky in Saudi Arabia that we do have a government that drives this at a whole nation level to build distinctive human capabilities and Industry 4.0 skills across the nation. But that doesn't happen very often in other countries where organizations work more independently. So we really need to start to think, what is that we're doing? And it's not for an elite group. Design thinking, storytelling, sense making, emotional intelligence, a growth mindset should be for everybody in the organization. And the way you deliver that at scale is to use learning technologies that can push it out to everybody in micro learning chunks, not in large workshops that take your people out for days and days. Of course, there's also a worker of the future. I still get a lot of complaints from people about millennials. I think millennials are fantastic, but they certainly don't want to work the way we worked before. But even if you talk to Gen X or even the others, people need collaborative working to get their work done. More people want flexible work hours. It's getting so hard to commute. Flexible workspaces, and they want a lot more communication choices. So not just do you need to be ready to give them the human skills, you also need to give them the environment and the policies that will help them to thrive in your workplace, to have that kind of employee experience that really means something to them. And of course, as we try and develop them, we have 20 minutes a week to do so, because they are at the moment overwhelmed. Most of them are impatient. If you want to do any development with them, even in this webinar, I had 5 to 10 seconds to grab your attention. Otherwise, your attention will be grabbed by something else. You get interrupted about every 5 minutes at work. You check your smartphones 9 times every hour. You're probably checking it right now as I'm speaking. And people are untethered. They're not at their workstations. They want learning on demand when they want it. They don't want it to have wait 6 months to go on a course. They want collaborative learning, social learning, and they want to be empowered. As we said, 2.5 to 5 years for any of their skills or degrees that they've done. So we have to keep reskilling, but we also have to make them accountable for their own learning so that they really start to drive their own development and understand the value of their skills, whether it's increasing in value or decreasing in value, and what they need to do to develop that. So a lot of people are actually paying out of their own pockets for learning now. If you see bottom right of that slide, 62% of IT professionals are paying out of their own pockets to keep themselves up to date with technology. So we need to make sure that there are multiple opportunities for continuous learning for our people. So what does this mean for HR? Quite a few things, actually. Obviously, we need to be data-based. We need to be the driver of adaptive organizations and also digitalization. We need to be very much part of the business. Talent management, as you can hear and see from everything we've spoken about, becomes absolutely critical. Do we have the capability to deliver our future? And do we have the skills that we need to deliver the outcomes that we want? And you'll see an increase on the left and a decrease on the other side. Administrative tasks have got to be automated. There is just no place anymore for spending hours and hours on paper-based or spreadsheets. It has to be automated. HR has to shape the culture that supports adaptive and transformational work. There's an enormous amount of change management and organization development required to make this all happen. And then the HR operating model probably has to change quite significantly. And all these things have to happen at the same speed as the organizational transformation. So again, I'm going to pause and ask Sophie to help me. If you start to look at what we've spoken about, the major challenges here, the question to you is, what are your major challenges? Maybe you can have a look at that slide and have a bit. Sorry, I've just muted myself there by accident. Do you need to be more strategic? Do you need to be more data-based? Are you struggling with the transactional tasks that are not automated? Do you feel part enough of the business? Where are your major challenges if you look at that in this new world of work?
We've got one question. I think it might have been from the last, it was from 2 minutes ago. How can we enable on-demand learning for team members within operational environments, e.g. factories, agricultural work?
Yes, that is a fantastic question, and I'm very happy to tell you that there is now Learning 4.0 technology available. The one that we work with is a company called TTRO, the Training Room Online, where you can actually build short micro videos to people that you can push through to their phones. You can do gamification where they can play games, so the learning becomes a game that's on their mobile. You can use augmented reality that they can go through, like with safety, we use that a lot in mining, where people can go through different scenarios and make decisions, and we can actually measure whether they're making mistakes or doing it correctly, how long they're taking, their decision process. And based on that, we have artificial intelligence and data analytics embedded that can then push out what they still need to learn based on how they've performed in that augmented reality exercise that we've given them. And this is becoming, you need the technology. There's no way you can do it without the learning technology. The current LMSs very often cannot deliver this kind of experience. Online learning itself is very boring. People hate it. So bringing in gamification, bringing in apps, bringing in short video clips, and being able to send that out to people based on their learning needs on an individualized learning path is really the way that you want to go. You also need to create collaborative learning through those technologies. I hope that helps. Any others, Sophie? What challenges people are facing in HR?
Yeah, making sense of disruptions with a better handle on data.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think data is a big challenge, and the problem is we've only touched 1% of data. So we're going to be overwhelmed with it. Any others?
That's all for now.
Okay. So it sounds like data is a big issue. I don't think most organizations have gotten their head around data. A lot of, when we work with senior leaders and do development, we start to talk about how their data is sometimes now worth more than their mines or their manufacturing plants. And you can see them really struggling with that issue, really not having come to terms with it. So again, it's something we really need to work with. People analytics becoming a really important. I hope you already have your people analytics capability and your design thinking capability embedded in your HR teams, because they're absolutely critical. All right, let's get back into our, now, what do the CEOs want? So it's good for us to know what we want, but when we ask the CEOs, and this is from a guy called Nick Holly, and he's a great researcher, definitely worth following, as is Josh Bersin. He interviewed a lot, hundreds of CEOs to say very recently, what do you want from HR? And these are the three things. And I'm wondering how you are doing in your HR function on these. The first one is commerciality. And someone said to me the other day, what does that look like? Well, what it looks like is not HR strategies that come from HR, but HR strategies that support mergers and acquisitions, growth targets, and specific business imperatives. Where we understand exactly how we need to work with talent, recruitment, etc., to drive those commercial outcomes. But the second thing they want from us, and this is something we are just not that good at yet, is simplicity. Have we over-engineered, over-designed a lot of our processes and practices and made it really hard for managers to work with it? It's really critical that we start to say, what is the minimum viable design? So we can get it out quickly, prototype it, test it, and make things simple and integrated. We don't want training on one side, recruitment on another side. How can we make this an integrated experience for managers and employees? And lastly, they want talent. They want the right talent at the right time, at the right cost, in the right place. So I wonder, if I look at your HR strategy and your focus, whether you've got too much in there, and secondly, whether it's really focused on commerciality, simplicity, and talent. Maybe, Sophie, there are a couple more comments that have come in around that. Sophie,
Yes.
there?
Yeah. Sorry, just unmuting myself. Choosing tech partners can be overwhelming. Any advice?
Oh, yes. And I think you probably get a cold call, 5 cold calls a week, maybe, from tech partners. My advice is, first thing to do is to make sure that you've designed your employee experience end to end. And you know exactly what the minimum viable design looks like, and exactly what the moments that matter look like. Because if you don't know what you want, all these tech partners are going to come and try and sell you something, and you don't know whether that's the right thing to enable your process and your strategy. So be very clear on what your employee experience design looks like. Be very clear on moments that matter, and then go out and find the technology that is right and that fits that specific moment of need or that employee experience that you're trying to do, so that you're in charge of it, not the tech partners. There are some really good tech curators, is what I would call them, out there at the moment. I think Josh Bersin is probably one of them. And I think it's really worth it. The other thing is really to really do your homework, go to some tech conferences, look at, start to understand. The market is huge. We'll look at some slides in a moment. But it is possible to do that. And again, work with your IT and finance people, partner with them very closely to enable this. But the technology is an enabler. It doesn't drive the outcomes. It doesn't drive the employee experience. What really drives it is the managers and how they behave and the culture people are in. And that it's an integrated experience. So hopefully that helps. Any others, Sophie? Any other comments or questions?
Yep. There is a lot of organisations implementing new HRIS systems to move transactional HR activities to a system. The difficulty seems to be uplifting capability of a self-service model and also changing the mindset of, we have always done it this way.
Yeah, actually, I'm probably going to be shot down in flames with this, but I'm actually saying to my clients, especially in Saudi, India, and Africa, that have not put in HRIS, not to put it in. They do have payroll systems that have the employee data in it, but what we're actually doing with them is we are designing the employee experience, and we're co-creating that with the employees and with the managers, because that then sets them up for wanting to be part of it and wanting to drive it. We don't then have to go post the event and try and convince them to do self-service. We make it really easy for them, because remember, it's behavioral economics. If something's not easy for you to do, you're not going to do it. I always use the example of when a friend is doing a fundraising activity and they ask you to do it and you don't have time, because when you go onto the site, you've got to click on it, take out your credit card, fill it in, write something, and you keep thinking, I'll do it. And before you know it, that time is gone. If we don't make it easier for people, using mobile technology, using apps, easy to use things, they are not going to do self-service. So we need to co-create the employee experience with them. And we need to, I think, enable it with as much mobile technology and easy workflows and minimum viable designs as possible, so that it's easy and fun for them to do it. It's a good experience. If I think of Aurecon's employee contract, which they've completely put into an animated version with an avatar that you can create for yourself. You can choose your own headgear, and it walks you through an animated look of that contract. That is just a lot more exciting for someone to fill in than a 50-page document that they've got to sign in 3 copies and send back to you. So I think we really need to think about that if we want our people on board. All right, so again, let's look at what Josh Bersin says. One of the biggest opportunities for HR is learning to leverage data, harness the power of AI that can also help us, predictive analytics, and just as I've said to you, behavior economics. I think understanding behavior economics is critical to HR being able to create compelling human-centered experiences for people. And so you'll see there that the research from Bersin shows 70% of companies are now heavily investing in people analytics, and 40% of them believe AI will impact their workforce significantly. So we have to give the commerciality, simplicity, and talent to the CEOs. At the same time, we have to make sure the way we do that is enabled by data, by analytics, by the software that creates this consumer-grade experience for our people. You have to start to think about your employees as consumers. And that's not easy to do. That's a big mind shift for people. People are not used to thinking about them that way. So what does that mean for HR? Well, we means that we probably have much broader roles than we have right now, because we need to flex our HR workforce to flow to work and priorities as the organization flows to work and priorities. We need to be a very strong partner in terms of driving adaptivity, analytics, analytical understanding of the workforce. We need to be fast and digital. We cannot be slow. We cannot be paper-based. We need to be an expert in business and data, but from a human factors point of view, we need to be able to speak the same language as business. We almost have to make ourselves obsolete. That comes back to the self-service. Employees need to start to drive their own learning, and people need to start to drive a lot more of their own things through workflow and own processes and updates. But we need to make sure at the same time that we then do much more value-adding activities, like reskilling the workforce, making sure that we understand the job impacts of digitalization, making sure we have industry level skills uplifts where we collaborate with our competition to make sure that the whole industry survives. We need to become a very holistic organizational developer, but also driver. And if we don't, we are really at risk of becoming obsolete in a way that we don't want to be. What we want to be obsolete in is in really heavy admin paper-based processes and very heavy dependence on us. We want to be obsolete in that. And then we want to be able to create projects that really drive business outcomes and drive those with the business. Much more like a consulting firm in many ways. So where are your key gaps? What are you thinking in terms of, are you seen as a key driver? Are you fast and digital? Are you driving broader roles? Are you seen as a holistic organizational developer? What's happening in your business? Where are your key gaps? Let me put that back up there for you. Any other comments or questions that you're putting on Q&A for us, Sophie?
Yeah, there's one. It's quite big. It's more of a comment than a question. I think a big challenge for us in HR is to build new ways for people to understand overall context, purpose for their business, and develop and build capability to think at a system level and use their judgment to translate data into insight or intervene when things go wrong. I've seen automation reduce customer experience or create unintended consequences that policies, processes, etc. haven't caught up with. Teaching people about event-driven processes and understanding moments that matter is paramount, and empowering them and skilling them to meet these commitments when automation fails a customer end user.
Absolutely. And for me, that happens when people digitize bad processes rather than digitalize an experience, a customer experience or an employee experience. So if something's already poorly designed and not engaging, and we simply throw that into an automated process, that is definitely not going to drive a significant experience for people. So you're absolutely right. It's got to be driven by customer and employee journeys. Thank you for that comment. So what does that mean for us? Well, one of the things we find interesting is when we work with HR functions, they'll often show us a people strategy, but they won't have an operating model in place. Now, I know a lot of you have followed Ulrich for many years. We think it's time for Ulrich on steroids, at least, and a bit of a shift from that traditional thinking of those three types of roles. Maybe you haven't even gotten to that level yet, but certainly Deloitte and others have started to come up with some new models. I like the one where you're jumping with the parachute with your customers, and you've got your HR leadership team and your senior business leaders being the parachute and creating that executive drive. I think the board fits in there as well. I don't think we can do this without the board. The board has to go from being a REM committee board to a talent committee board to start to drive this for you. with significant impact. And so we jump with them, and we have our 3 services, and we'll probably always have those kind of services. We will have an HR operational service. Note, it's not a shared service, it's an operational service. So what it is that's where your employee experience sits, and that's where your digitalization sits, because they drive end-to-end employee experience from an operational perspective. And so what we really want there is the employee experience designs and the digitalization happening, which is very different from what operational services did before. And they work with core vendors, whether it's digital platforms or whatever those are, they will manage those platforms for us. We also then have our communities of expertise, and note, it's not centers. I think people have felt that centers that are centralized have become quite inflexible for them, and sometimes starts to generate work that's not adding value to the business. So what we mean by communities is we can actually pull a whole lot of people into any community of expertise we need, with a couple of key specialists in our organization. And finally, you'll see that it does not say business partner, it says business HR. And that's a critical shift, because business partner means we're just a partner. Business HR means we are there to drive business outcomes. And so that is a critical shift in terms of language. And none of that is possible without the workforce data and insights that sits there. And you'll see, first thing it says, HR online mobile experience. It has to be mobile. Metrics that make sense, that you're tracking, you're enabling technology, which can or cannot be an HRIS. It doesn't have to be. The new apps and information technologies coming out have in many ways gone past that. What you do need though is data analytics that can pull all that data out of the cloud for you for your predictive analytics. And of course, minimum viable design, policies and processes. And especially there's some of the new things we need, like social media policy, really, really critical for us to get right. And of course, on the outside, we still have the clouds of external networks and employment brand. We are very much also, other than the analytic skills we need and the design thinking skills we need strong marketing branding knowledge to be able to build these employment brands for people that are not yet part of our organization, but we want to attract into our organization. And more HR is getting involved with external business customers. There's some really interesting things happening, especially in the purpose-driven organizations where employees are becoming part of doing some really purpose-driven work, and it gives them purpose and sense. And so HR is getting really involved in what does that look like? As part of our employment experience, we create purpose for our people. We get them involved in things in the community. We stand up for some things. More and more organizations are really agitating for the environment or something like that. And HR has to work alongside that to see how that works. So my question to you for a moment is, have you updated your operating model? Do you have a strong operating model in place that really can leverage all these pieces? A lot of you will say to me, but we're too small. Well, even if you're small, you have to think about how you deliver all 3 of those components. Let me just pause for a moment. Where are you at the moment with your HR operating model? Does it drive this level of agility, flexibility, coordination, networking, and alignment? You can just pop that in the notes for us. Have you given enough thought to your operating model? Let's see what people have to say, Sophie.
Nothing just yet.
Maybe they don't have operating models. There's something.
There we go. Model under review, standard Ulrich at the moment, but this needs to change in light of a significant business transformation need.
Okay, yeah. I mean, Ulrich was great for his time, but it really is time to look. And one of the things you'll see in a moment is that you need flow to work models. So we'll come to that in a moment. Any others? Have you moved past Ulrich? Do you have an operating model? Or shall I show you the next piece of the operating model, which I think is the real change that we need to see. So this is the model we've actually put in place in Saudi Arabia with a mining client. And this is really critical to start to look at how your business partners or your HR business works with your communities of expertise, bearing in mind that you already will have, in this case, that operational HR employee experience in place that is digitized. So if you have a look at what we've done here, so this, imagine that those green pillars, one would be gold, one would be aluminium, one would be bauxite. So they're all different kinds of parts of this mining company. And what we've done is we've put an HR business partner in each of those, depending on their size, some are combined. And then what we have is in the communities of expertise, we have some really specialized experts in organization effectiveness. So the blue, mobility, resourcing, talent, reward, learning and development. In this specific client, we added another blue bar and we called that consulting. And what we did there is we had a very, very thin or very lean community of expertise. And then we had a group of people that we called consulting. And those people we flow to work. So like a consulting firm, we will resource them onto projects based on the needs from the business partners. So what happens here is the business partners are pulling the work from the communities of expertise and the consulting firm. So if you look at the strategic capabilities the organization wants to drive, you can see that in gold, for example, this is just an example, number one, if you look at that number one box, they want to drive into new markets. So they want to go and maybe expand, get other gold mines in other markets. And so what the business partner is doing there is they've said, if this is a new market play for my business, then we need rapid expansion, we need talent acquisition, and we need global mobility. Those are my priorities for the year, or maybe for the next 2 years. And so what I do is I go and pull from mobility, resourcing, and talent community to help me. So I'm the project manager for this. And I also might need some flow to work consultants to help me do some data analytics, to help me do some training and development so that we can then make that happen. So it's fully business driven. If you look at number two, this is an organization, let's say it's Phosphate in this example, who have to drive workforce efficiency. That is their goal. So they need workforce analytics, culture, scheduling, and development. And so they will go and pull the talent, reward, and learning and development teams, maybe a few consultants, and drive that project through. Project three, we've got Phosphate and maybe bauxite that needs to grow through mergers and acquisitions. And so what they'll need there is onboarding, culture integration, organization design, and a lot of change management. So in this case, the two HR business people are working together across those and pulling from org effectiveness and mobility to help them. So can you see how it's very, very different to what we normally did, which were quite isolated centers, these three. What we're doing now is we're integrating it. Bearing in mind operational is working, because operational has to work. This is how you would drive out the business priorities for the organization. So I'll pause there now that you've seen the rest of the operating model, and ask you what you think. And Sophie, I see there is an extra comment that came in.
Yeah, it is challenges to build the HR capability that has only just been deployed or developed, sorry.
Yes, and I think it's really important for us to fast track it. That's one of the reasons we started to look at adaptive HR programs, is how can we fast track this capability over a 7 to 9 month period so that people can really reset the whole picture and capability for themselves, because we don't have a lot of time. I'm really interested in people's responses to the slide I have up. And if you think that could work, if it scares you, what that would mean. Are you already working like that? We don't see a lot of clients working like that yet, but we're certainly getting a lot of clients interested in Africa, the Middle East, and Europe in wanting to move this way. Struggling very much with the HR business partner role more than anything else. So there's a comment, Sophie, for us.
Yeah, the new way of working fundamentally challenge the current ways of working that are very siloed, would scare our people.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are, and we are just, I think people get really frustrated when they come to us and we say, well, that's not our issue, that's learning and development, or that's so and so. Or if we come with things that we think are good things to do and we've seen it in the market and we want to emulate that, but it doesn't drive their priorities, like an M&A or like a new market that they want to get into. I think they really want our attention to be absolutely focused on their strategic drivers. And there's some more, Sophie, I think, that have come in.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Love the model. We often expect HR to do day-to-day activities plus manage major change, and we compromise and slow outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important to prioritize. I think every single HR team we work with have too many things on their plate, too many, and not doing them well. And so how can you absolutely become laser sharp focused on those strategic outcomes the organization has while you are transforming HR? So you remember you're doing two things here. You're transforming HR and its capability, while at the same time you are building your employee experience and making sure you're going after those 2 or 3 key strategic priorities for the organization. And the rest you're going to have to stop doing because you simply don't have the time and capability and resources to do it. And it's really hard for people to stop doing things, but it's absolutely critical. Right, there's some more things that come in.
Yeah, love it. But I think Australian organisations have really bought into Ulrich's model and like having one point of contact.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think that's not going to be, well, I think the business partner is actually the HR business person is the one point of contact in this model, and they become, but their role has changed significantly. They become the driver of strategic outcomes, pulling from the communities of expertise and leveraging that operational employee experience that's digitalized. So I think that you can actually keep that in place. But I think we do need to take the next level of Ulrich. Otherwise, we'll keep on being stuck in silos between operational HR, shared services, business HR, and our centers of expertise that are quite centralized. Good comment. Any others?
Yep, there's a few. Great point. The BAU still needs to be done while transformation initiatives are undertaken.
Yeah, and that's your dual strategy, right? So you want to have what I call a 2-tier strategy. So how can I spend time in both? Do I split teams for an interim design so that I have teams that are working in the new way and teams that are sorting out the transformation? There's a lot of decisions you have to make here, but it's certainly what we call a dual strategy. And by the way, it's not just HR that's in that space. Finance, IT, manufacturing, everybody else is having to do the same thing. They're having to transform. They have to, almost like walking on the bridge while building it. Kind of thing that you have to do and make sure that you keep building capability for the future. So you have to do less, but you have to focus on both. Absolutely right. And some more.
Yeah, our model is also under review. The new way of working is exciting, demonstrates a more integrated and disciplined approach and investment in change and ability to support multiple business streams areas.
That's fantastic. Thank you for those comments. We'll move forward. Of course, none of this will work if you don't automate those horrid HR processes that are keeping you so busy. Well, basically, Deloitte says that 50% of our standard HR processes can have robotics applications. So hopefully you are banging on the door of IT and tech and saying to them, come on, help us. Let's do manual error reduction. Let's get our data sorted. Let's improve our customer service. So that we can use our HR professionals differently. Hopefully you are in the throes of really automating those processes and reducing the resources required to create and maintain them. I'm still meeting global and multinational teams that have up to, almost 40, 50 people in the operational HR services division because they have not automated and made this robotics. And then they have very, very lean people that are supporting them in the mergers and acquisitions and the reskilling of their workforces where they really need the skills. So this is absolutely critical for being able to change your business model and should be a real priority for you as an organization. All right, so lots of current roles in HR. I'm wondering how many of the new roles you've started to pick up. Do you have an agile enabler, for example? someone that does that, an innovation architect, maybe a data analyst, a digital consultant, a health guide, a culture builder. We still need people managers. Um, I'm wondering whether you've created those new roles in your team. And I'd love you to pop a note in there for us if you've developed any of these roles recently and have seen the difference it can make. Have you got some design thinkers in there? Have you got some analytical people in there? Have you got people that are trained in Agile and Scrum? What is happening in your skill sets and roles for HR? Or do you still have the very traditional HR roles and structure in your organization? Just drop us a note. We'd love to hear and just help the rest of the community to understand. I see someone's added something there for us.
Yeah, still very traditional.
Yeah, and I remember being almost 2-3 years ago at a function, or actually at an innovation workshop, a Harvard innovation workshop, and someone from BHP was there. If there's someone from BHP, this is a shout out to you. And said to me, I work with, my role is to look at how humans and technology work together. And that was her job in HR, human machine interaction. And I still haven't seen a lot of organizations that have created those kind of roles. But it makes complete sense if you're in a mining environment where you're looking at driverless trucks and you're looking at all these things, to start to really understand that human machine interaction and which jobs can be better done by humans and which ones can be better done by machines. Any others? Any people who've had some really exciting restructures, new roles come into HR that can start to drive some of these things? Or are you having to beg, borrow, and steal from IT, analytics people, from marketing? What is happening? We're not seeing a lot of people telling us that they've got some new roles. Hopefully there would be 1 or 2 examples from our cohort today.
Yeah, there's another one. Yes. Invested in a data analyst, immediately changed the conversations with the leaders and have driven fast decisions as a result.
That is fantastic. That would be my number 1 investment. If I had to make an investment, that would definitely be my number 1 investment. Any more, Sophie?
Innovation architect started, while small steps looking to automate cyclical HR activities, no new roles, but embedded in existing roles.
Fantastic. And of course, that's what you want to do. You also want to reskill your current people so that they are relevant for the new world of work. All right, so I think you all know the employee experience. What we are not seeing a lot of yet, and where these new roles are so critical, is that it really needs to be reframed in an integrated, joined experience for people. Once you've got that employee experience in place and you've digitalized it, that real journey or that continuous series of journeys for people, you can really get on with getting the organization culture sorted, getting leadership development in place, and really supporting the higher end drives of an adaptive organization. So without this employee experience, it's going to continue to be hard for you to do that. So this absolutely has got to be, a lot of you now doing employee experience work. I would just probably warn that doing it little bit by little bit, just by doing onboarding and just by doing that, does not give you that total cycle and a total minimum viable design. Also had a lot of questions from people who are in multinationals where you know, you've got different countries and often things are not localized. Our view there is you should have a minimum viable design at a global level and then look at the moments that matter for your local cohort and add those on into the experience so that people do feel that it has been customized. Because one of the key things about employee engagement is that people don't want to feel like they're part of a herd. They want to feel like you have listened to them individually and you have crafted some individual things for them that they can experience. So this employee experience is so important, but it needs to be integrated. Of course, not just for your internal talent. So the other thing we see clients doing is they're only doing the employee experience for their internal talent. Well, that's a little bit hard because we now have one client where we have 40 people working with an ecosystem of 700 people managing a multi-billion-dollar super fund. And if we don't pull those freelance, partnership, crowdsourcer, competition talent into our employee experience and line them up with our values, it becomes really hard to create the customer experience that we're after. Because all these people are interacting with our customer at the end of the day. And so with 40% contingent workforce, are you thinking about your talent in a very different way? So my view is you start with the capability you require, and then you have a look at what you can do internally and what you need to pull through your gig economy. Once you've done that, you make sure that you engage each of those groups is a persona in your employee experience, and you make sure that you understand the moments that matter to them so that they can then engage with you and want to partner with you rather than with other organizations, and want to do their best work for you and want to be an advocate for you out in the market. And this is really critical. A lot of people have not really bedded this down well in terms of how they can work with the organization. We have clients in Africa that are now going down this route and really getting it and saying, if it's hard for us to find talent in one country, we can now partner and collaborate and crowdsource and freelance. And it doesn't matter because not all jobs have to be physically located with us. So I've seen some really interesting things. I've seen people work out of Boston for a Middle Eastern company. I've seen people work out of Ireland for a Middle Eastern company. I think that technology really makes anything possible for us. Right, so there are a couple of people doing this really well. IKEA does this well, and they understand the link of their employee experience with the brand. That is absolutely critical, especially with things like Glassdoor, where people are talking about us publicly. But you need to, here is your really scary slide for the day. You need to digitalize that employee experience. And someone asked me earlier, how do I choose the technology? Oh, I wish I could give you a really good answer, because this is a slide just from 2017 about HR technology and apps that are available right now in 2017. And I would imagine that it is 4 times more at least now. Now, there's some of them I know, some I've never seen. I have certainly tried to do my own research, and I suggest you do the same. Knowing which parts of the employee experience you really want to work with is to then go into the different areas, looking at what are the recruiting apps that we have, the interview tools, the flexible hiring, but then also trying to see what are the best companies using. So I've certainly gone in and looked at what are the top companies using, so that I can just cut through the number of apps that are available, which, as you can see, is just a plethora. Some of them do more than one thing. So Culture Amp, for example, you'll see in a couple of them, but some of them simply do one thing. So maybe this helps you as a starting pack, just to look through here and see what you have or what you've seen. I think it's good as well to form communities in HR where we can share these things with each other of what's working and not working. But you certainly have a lot of choice today. You certainly cannot complain about choice. And this is why you're getting so many cold calls too. All right, so I just want to quickly take you through a case study as a final wrap up. BBVA Bank, wonderful. As you know, ING has done the same. So they really started to think about how can they change their HR community. So they wanted to first so in 2016, they created a pool of people that's dedicated to projects. So remember I said to you, flow to work, how do you get more flexible resourcing in all their talent and culture units? So they moved 10% of all their human resources people into this project-based organization that can now support this business HR. And then they started to look at shared services in every country, but quickly found that they couldn't do the shared services by country. They needed to become much more agile. So they did the employee experience design work, and they put the digital apps in and really became fully agile. And then they took their talent and culture, is what they call human resources, team of 2,000 people in 10 countries. And they started to put them into 4 groups. So group 1 is the business partners, and they offer strategic advice and support to internal customers. And they really understand the needs and priorities. They know whether it's M&A, and this is typically in their organization 10 to 15% of their team. I think in others it could be higher. The second group was to have that lean discipline group, so that communities of expertise. So we need theoretical models, tools, and platforms. They're also about 10 to 15% of their total team. Then they had this really interesting third team, which is the solutions development team. So they could also be part of that consulting arm that you put together. So these are multidisciplinary teams, work end to end in Scrum. So they're using Scrum technologies to come up with solutions. So we've got our experts, we have our business partners, and then we have these end-to-end teams, cross-functional. And it might mean you pull people from the business, which is great, to start working with you and to really co-create with people. And then finally, they have their employee experience team. And that team, as we said, works on the whole employee experience design. They're about 40 to 50%. And they use things like Kanban, which is also digital experiences. So there's some real opportunities for you here. You could have your business partners, you could have your key experts, you could have solution development happening in flow to work and end-to-end multidisciplinary teams. And then finally, you can build your employee experience team, because it also has to keep being updated. Our employee experience is not static, so it needs to be updated. And so I'll end on this slide. In the new world, it's not the big fish that eats the small fish, it's the fast fish that eats the slow fish. And don't say that too quickly, because it's quite hard. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please feel free in the next minute or two to pop one or two more questions in there for me. Sophie, if there's any more questions people have put up before we end this webinar. While you look at that, or maybe put a question in, we are running the adaptive HR programs with Next Step. You could do all 7 modules if you wanted to learn more after today, working with the team. Which is great, because that takes you end to end, from strategy to branding to everything you've seen today, including how to work Dialogic OD, digitalize HR. But you can also attend individual masterclasses in this set of masterclasses here. So please feel free to contact the team. Their contact is down there, info@thehrspace.com.au. Otherwise, we're just very happy that you've joined us. And let me see if there's 1 or 2 questions we can end with.
Yeah, there's a few shout outs, Marianne. Thanks for the session. Great info, really valuable, fabulous content. Lisa's asked, will this webinar be available for future viewing? Yes, it will be. We'll send out a link next week, I think. We've also got one question. How do you suggest we as practitioners skill up?
Well, the only way I've really seen, I know I'm putting the program up again, but we've run this program now 5 times in the Middle East and twice here in Australia with one of the business schools. The reason I designed this program is because there wasn't anything, and I didn't want people to have to go back through a master's degree. And even then, I'm not convinced that the universities really understand the new world of work that well either. So we've created something for you. That would be one suggestion. There's quite a few HR hacking opportunities out there. I'm speaking at one soon. I think you've got to do that. I think you've got to read a lot. You've got to follow Josh Bersin. You've got to follow Mercer, I think does amazing work in the space. You've really got to know. You are very welcome to go on LinkedIn with me. I post every day things that I think are helpful for people. But it's going to take a lot of driving your own learning, attending something like Adaptive HR, because it is a critical and serious issue for us to reskill ourselves. Any others, Sophie, just before we go?
Just more thanks, but I think Alan wanted to say something before we ended the call.
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much, Marianne, from all of us at The Next Step and the HR Space for today. That was a really, really fantastic, insightful session. So thank you for your time. There's certainly plenty for everyone to think about. And we also want to just thank all of our attendees who took the time out to join us in our first webinar. So we hope to have many more to come. So thank you very much. And as you said, Marianne will be facilitating the Adaptive HR full 7-module program, which will begin in June in Melbourne. So that's face-to-face 7 modules. And if anybody is curious to learn more about that program, feel free to contact me. I did email everybody before the webinar, so you'll have my details. And just wanted to thank you again for your time. It's fantastic.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.